My favorite meal of the day is dessert. You could even say that I am a dessertarian. Cakes, brownies, ice cream, donuts, all of these are great, but I really like cookies. Cookie Clicker is a fairly well-known video game where one of the things that you can do is to make a lifetime supply of cookies for each human on the planet. So it makes sense that I would enjoy the game a lot, doesn't it? But for some reason, I don't play Cookie Clicker anymore. The game failed to keep my attention compared to other games in the same genre. In this video, I will attempt to analyze my tastes in game design and discuss the question, why don't I play Cookie Clicker anymore? I've tried to make this discussion accessible so that if you've never played Cookie Clicker, you can still appreciate the game design insights that I uncover in this video. And for anyone who's curious, yes, I did boot up Cookie Clicker for the first time in months for the sole purpose of getting information and fact-checking for this video and for collecting relevant footage to show. The simple answer: why don't I play Cookie Clicker anymore? Let's not overthink things. It is an unavoidable truth that different people have different tastes in games. That's okay. There is nothing inherently wrong with a game that isn't for everyone, and there's nothing wrong with disliking a game that lots of other people enjoy. On top of that, you don't even need a good reason to like or dislike something. You can just say, I like the vibes, or I dislike the vibes, and that's enough justification. So, my answer to this central question is this. It just so happens that I enjoy other games more than Cookie Clicker, so when I'm given the choice, I use my free time to play those other games instead. That's it. To put it bluntly, I don't think Cookie Clicker is that great. However, this is my opinion, and it is not a fact. Some people will agree with this, some people will disagree with this, and that's okay. But the point of this video is not to mindlessly complain about Cookie Clicker. I want to explore the topic in a bit more detail. Why is it that, given my taste in video games, Cookie Clicker fails to hold my interest? What is it about that game that I don't like? I want to have a serious and thoughtful discussion, so let's do that. I've come to the conclusion that the reason I don't find Cookie Clicker compelling is because I believe it lacks mechanical depth. So I'm going to analyze different features of the game, poke at their mechanical structure, and talk about why I don't find them super compelling. Where relevant, I'm going to look at other games that do similar things to try to tease apart the difference between the games that I think are really good and Cookie Clicker. One thing I want to mention is that Cookie Clicker is a very well-polished game. Image assets, the animations, the sound effects are very well done. The thing is, it's clear that a lot of hard work was put into making Cookie Clicker, but for some reason it just doesn't click for me. Oh, spoiler warning. I guess there's spoilers for Cookie Clicker in this video. I'm going to spoil pretty much the entire game, so if that's something that you care about, stop watching right now. Buildings. The mechanics don't match the flavor. So in Cookie Clicker, the primary currency is called cookies, and there are 3 ways to obtain it. The first way is to click on this big cookie right here in the center of the screen. I mean, it's in the name of the game. In a game called Cookie Clicker, you click the cookie. It's pretty obvious. The second way is to click on golden cookies. At random intervals, a shiny-looking gold-colored cookie will appear somewhere on the screen. When clicked, these grant the player a randomly selected temporary bonus. By far, the most important source of cookies is passive production from buildings. There are 20 different types of buildings which are unlocked by reaching a certain threshold of cookie currency. The first building is the cursor. It generates 0.1 cookies per second because it clicks on the cookie for you automatically. That makes perfect sense. Then there's a grandma, which generates 1 cookie per second because grandmothers bake cookies. That makes perfect sense. Then there's the farm, which generates 8 cookies per second. This is a fictional game about cookies, so of course you can grow cookie plants. And so on with each building in the list. With each new type of building, they're almost exactly identical to each other. The numbers are different, of course. The more cookies are required to unlock a building, the more the building costs, and the more cookies that building generates. but in terms of mechanics and function, they're identical. Farms are not affected by seasons or weather or anything like that. When you build banks, there is no mechanical representation of the economy that they are a part of. They just generate cookies at a constant rate. When you build shipments, there is no mechanical representation of the exoplanet that they bring in cookies from. They just generate cookies at a constant rate. When you build time machines, there is no time-related mechanic that they make available. They just generate cookies at a constant rate. When you build JavaScript consoles, there's nothing to mechanically represent the player breaking the fourth wall or how that might impact their cookie-producing powers. The JavaScript consoles just generate cookies at a constant rate. And I see this as a missed opportunity. Despite the cool icons and the flavor text, there's nothing to mechanically differentiate these buildings from each other. Each higher tier of building is more powerful than the previous one, only because it has a larger base production. So when I played Cookie Clicker for the first time and I tried to unlock all of the buildings, at first I was driven by curiosity because I wanted to know what the name and the icon and the flavor text of the next building that I unlocked was. However, once I realized that all of the buildings were identical to each other, I understood everything I needed to know about a building and how to use it before I unlocked it, because the new building I would unlock is the same as all of the other ones I've already seen. In Cookie Clicker, there are a bunch of upgrades the player can purchase that cost cookies but will give them a bonus to their cookie income. Each building has 15 upgrades, and each of those 15 upgrades for each building doubles the cookie output of that specific building. There's only 2 buildings that break this pattern. There's the Cursor, which has its own thing going on, and there's the Grandma, which, in addition to the tiered upgrades, it has different Grandma types who boost other buildings based on your Grandma count. These Grandma type upgrades are flavorful, and they make a refreshing break from the monotony of having too many similar upgrades. I also want to mention that there are mini-games that are tied to the different types of buildings. I will talk about them in a dedicated section later in this video. It is not inherently bad to have 20 types of buildings that all do the same thing, or more generally, 20 game pieces that all act identically. Cities Skylines has the unique buildings, which except for very few select special unique buildings that have specially programmed behavior, all of the unique buildings function mechanically identically as tourist attractions, just with different numbers. You could also make a comparison to the vanilla creatures in Magic the Gathering, which, aside from having different numbers on the card and different types, they are all pretty much the same. They don't have any special abilities. The reason that I don't mind these is that those games have very rich mechanical systems outside of that. So the fact that they have a lot of basic game pieces is fine. Cities Skylines has enough depth in other aspects of its simulation, especially its traffic and its economy, that it doesn't really bother me that the zoo from the After Dark DLC doesn't interact with the zoo areas from the Park Life DLC, or that the Mall of Moderation, Posh Mall, and Grand Mall don't act as commercial zones that require regular deliveries of goods to function. In Magic the Gathering, even a vanilla creature is a very flexible object. It can attack, it can block, it can be used as sacrifice fodder for an ability, or it can count as a spell cast for something else that cares about casting spells. A creature in Magic the Gathering can be relevant due to its colors, its creature types, or its cost. So the reason that the buildings from Cookie Clicker bother me, and that they're so uninteresting, is that the game doesn't have that much mechanical depth in other places. At least for my tastes, there aren't enough other interesting systems to offset the fact that this one system here is boring. What design change do I think would fix this problem? Considering that the flavor and the aesthetics are the strongest thing that Cookie Clicker has going for it, it might be good to give these buildings mechanics that match their flavor. So let's try adding a new mechanic onto a mechanically bland building. Let's take Chance Makers. The flavor of this building is that they generate cookies from luck. The game has a few systems that are based on randomness, such as the golden cookie mechanic. So perhaps Chance Makers should be deeply tied to an ability that modifies the probability of getting different results from golden cookies. We could flavor it around the player twisting luck to work in their favor. That resonates strongly with existing flavor text, such as messages on the in-game news ticker. But enough complaining. I want to examine what game design lessons, or lessons about my personal taste in game design, that can be learned from this. I've noticed that I personally am willing to tolerate having a few shallow systems in a game if the other systems in the game contain sufficient depth to offset that. I don't know if this applies to other players, if other people feel the same way, so I don't know if it's generally applicable. Where possible, game mechanics should resonate strongly with flavor. The narrative lacks mechanical support. Cookie Clicker has a simple narrative told mostly through the in-game news ticker and the flavor text of upgrades. One day, a baker, that's the player character, opens up a new bakery and starts baking cookies. Their fame spreads, first across their local neighborhood, then the country, then the world, and then at some point to other dimensions. Alongside the industrial-scale cookie production comes cookie-themed industrial disasters. Chocolate mines destroying villages, magic accidents wreaking havoc on the world, black holes erasing cities from existence. Despite the collateral damage, cookie production continues unabated. The baker, ever hungering for new ways to produce cookies, turns to ever more exotic methods, importing cookies from other planets, converting light into cookies, stealing cookies from other universes. Things start to change when this baker builds a bingo center/research facility where all the grandmothers they have employed can relax a little bit and also research brand new technologies. That's where the problems start, because the technologies that these grandmothers invent, well, they get a little weird. If the player chooses to purchase them, which the game warns is a bad idea, it triggers the Grandma Apocalypse, in which old ladies all around the planet turn into horrible flesh monsters and ominous creatures called wrinklers appear and leech away at the cookie production. The survivors of humanity are left to deal with an apocalypse because this player character, baker, cookie, emperor, gave no care or no thought to humanity, caring only for the growth of their cookie production. And that's pretty much the whole story as far as I'm aware. I'm going to compare the story of Cookie Clicker to Universal Paperclips because there's some insight to be gained from such a comparison. Spoiler warning for Universal Paperclips. It's a good game, I recommend it. Jump to this timestamp on screen if you don't want to hear me talk about how the protagonist dies at the end of their life. So, where to start? The story for Universal Paperclips is somewhat similar to the story for Cookie Clicker, except that it's better. I actually have a lot of fond memories of the time I spent playing Universal Paperclips. In Universal Paperclips, the story involves an apocalypse of the player's own creation that dooms humanity. Eventually, it leads to the destruction of the Earth, and then the destruction of the entire universe. Yet the story is executed much better because it is tied into the game mechanics more deeply than in Cookie Clicker. It's not just that the messages in the in-game log or the flavor text on the upgrades tell the story. The structure of the game mechanics themselves tell the story. In Universal Paperclips, the player is an artificial intelligence whose singular goal is to make paperclips. The game is a cautionary tale about the dangers of AI because the AI in the story prioritizes paperclips above all else. At the beginning of the game, there is this resource called money, which you have to manage. You can get it by selling paperclips to the human consumers or by investing in the stock market. At some point, the AI figures out how to start solving humanity's problems, like ending all wars and stopping climate change. To be clear, you don't do this because you care about the humans, you do this because if you can get the humans to trust you, they will give you more computing resources. About a third of the way through the game, once you have amassed enough computational resources, you can release the hypnodrones. Old resources like trust from the humans or money are now completely meaningless, and the game introduces a few new mechanics. Now you have to manage your own wire production and your own power grid. The game doesn't explicitly tell the player what happened to humanity, but by looking at the game mechanics, it's pretty clear. And so the AI begins turning the Earth into paperclips. 2/3 of the way through the game, things change drastically yet again. The Earth has run out of resources because the entire planet has been converted into paperclips. All of the exponential machinery that you built up for paperclip production It sits idle since there are no more non-paperclip materials left to consume. But the game is not complete. The AI's mission is not fulfilled, so it turns to the stars. It builds self-replicating spacecraft called von Neumann probes to explore the universe, gather material, and feed that material to an ever-growing fleet of paperclip factories. The final phase of gameplay introduces more new features, managing the drone's stats, making sure that they don't die to the inherent hazards of space travel, and dealing with combat against a portion of your own swarm of drones. In the left corner of the screen, there's this little panel that tracks how much of the universe your probes have explored. The universe is infinite, right? Well, apparently not in this game. At some point, this starts slowly ticking upwards from 0, but due to the exponential nature of the game, it's not too long before this reaches 100%. With the entire universe explored, harvested, and converted into paperclips, paperclip production finally halts. There is no more matter. There are no more paperclips to be made. That is where the game ends. The part about this story that Universal Paperclips does so well is that each chapter in the story makes the player feel different because it changes the moment-to-moment gameplay. These turning points feel impactful because new mechanics are introduced and old mechanics become irrelevant. In comparison, the apocalypse from Cookie Clicker has a very small mechanical impact. It replaces the beneficial golden cookies with wrath cookies, which have a chance of a negative effect. It introduces wrinklers, these leech-like cookies that consume part of your cookie production, but give back more cookies than they consumed when you popped them. Grandmothers get a production bonus. These are some interesting changes, but the apocalypse doesn't affect any other systems in the game. The Grandma Apocalypse doesn't change the moment-to-moment gameplay all that much. Importantly, I want to consider the feeling that such narrative events and their mechanical execution evoke in the player. Obviously, this part is subjective and based on my own experience. When I play Universal Paperclips, I feel like I am an AI with a single-minded goal. The destruction of all life on Earth, that was an afterthought. The Earth only mattered because it was material from which paperclips were to be made. Cookie Clicker does not do as great a job at evoking that sort of feeling in me. When I play Cookie Clicker, it doesn't feel like my actions have consequences. Supposedly, when these eldritch abominations take over the world, it's because the Grand Matriarchs are angered. The background of the game changes to reflect that, as does the icon for grandmas, but the game mechanics don't make me feel like I'm the target of any anger. It doesn't stop grandmas from producing cookies or contributing to production bonuses for other buildings. The wrinklers are an interesting mechanic. They aesthetically and mechanically evoke the concept of eldritch cookie monsters that defy logic. But the only gameplay difference that they make is that the player has to be careful not to pop them too soon on accident. As it stands currently, the narrative of Cookie Clicker feels underwhelming, which perhaps is a little bit of an unfair criticism because it's not a narrative-heavy game, unlike Universal Paperclips. But the fact that Universal Paperclips tells its story so well is evidence to me that the genre has the capacity to tell meaningful narrative through a game's mechanical systems. For another example of a game that tells narrative primarily through its mechanics, check out Antimatter Dimensions. So, what game design lessons can we learn from this? Where possible, game mechanics should resonate strongly with the narrative that the game intends to tell, and the interactions between the game mechanics and the player will tell a narrative, whether or not that was the designer's intention. Heavenly upgrades and why I kept playing. In case it hasn't been clear from the video footage that I've already shown, I got pretty far into Cookie Clicker before deciding to quit. The one feature of the game that compelled me to play for as long as I did was the Ascension mechanic. There's a very common mechanic among games of this genre, often called Prestige, where the player is given the ability to reset most features of the game and gain a new currency that applies permanent bonuses. The details of this mechanic differ wildly from game to game. In Cookie Clicker, clicking this Legacy button opens a menu that allows the player to ascend if they've made enough progress in their current run. Ascension resets most things in the game as if starting over from the beginning, but in exchange it grants prestige levels and heavenly chips. Prestige levels apply a permanent passive bonus to cookie production. Heavenly chips are a currency that can be spent on permanent upgrades. Permanent upgrades form I'm going to call it the Heavenly Upgrades tree because it's a directed graph on which each node is a permanent upgrade. I'm going to discuss 4 things related to this tree. Firstly, there are upgrades for pretty much every aspect of the game except the minigames. There are upgrades that make wrinklers more profitable, upgrades to increase your production of sugar lumps, which are a secondary currency, upgrades to make golden cookies appear more frequently, upgrades to make buildings cheaper, and more. The fact that one system, the Heavenly Upgrades, interacts with all these other systems in the game makes them feel like they're all part of one cohesive whole. Except for the minigames, they feel a little bit tacked on. Secondly, because these Heavenly Upgrades have the power to affect any other area of the game, the mechanics evoke the feeling that they are above everything else. The flavor of the Ascension system is further reinforced by the names and flavor text. One branch of the tree is named after angels and demons. Other upgrades reference themes of the supernatural or of places where time and space become meaningless. If there is one system in Cookie Clicker where the mechanics vibrantly evoke the same flavor as the aesthetics, it is these Heavenly Upgrades. From my own personal experience, whenever I was able to afford a Heavenly Upgrade, it really made me feel like I had, at least temporarily, ascended beyond the limits of normal upgrades and buildings and entered a new realm. Thirdly, the opportunity cost of these upgrades is a huge factor in decision making. The normal upgrades, that's what I'll call upgrades purchased during the course of a run with cookies and that are reset every time you ascend. The normal upgrades don't really have much opportunity cost because cookies are produced continuously over time. So getting one upgrade doesn't mean you have to forgo another upgrade, it just means you have to wait a few minutes. However, the Heavenly Upgrades cost Heavenly Chips to purchase, which are only generated when you ascend, and each Heavenly Chip is more difficult to obtain than the last. A player only has access to the Heavenly Upgrades tree in between the period where they've ascended and when they start their next run, which means that choosing to purchase an upgrade later means after the next time they ascend, which in practice might be hours later. Since ascending means starting over, the game has elements of strategy surrounding ascending at the correct time to get enough Heavenly Chips to make the next purchase. Since time is valuable, choosing which upgrade to purchase is a meaningful decision to make. This is especially true in the early stages of the game where Heavenly Chips are scarce and the cost of upgrades is at the same order of magnitude as the amount of chips currently available to spend. This fades away as the player gets many orders of magnitude more of Heavenly Chips, which gives the sense of power and progression because the player has the resources to choose all upgrades, rather than having to be selective. Fourthly, there are a few specific upgrades that I want to talk about. From a design standpoint, I really like the permanent upgrade slot upgrades in theory, but not in practice. These are Heavenly Upgrades that allow you to select one normal upgrade each, and you'll start future runs with these normal upgrades already purchased. This sounds like a great idea because it makes the player evaluate the normal upgrades in a different way. Hey, look at this huge list of upgrades. If you could pick just one to get for free at the start of a run, which would you choose? You could choose an expensive upgrade that would be normally confined to the late stages of a run, so that you can benefit immediately and get a huge discount. Or you could choose an upgrade with a powerful effect for the early stages of the run to speed up the early game. Or maybe if there was a useful upgrade with a weird unlock condition that required you to jump through some hoops, you could choose that upgrade to save yourself the trouble of meeting the requirement each run. Unfortunately, the permanent upgrade slots are much more boring to use in practice because they let you select from among the normal upgrades. And the normal upgrades just are not exciting. I'll discuss this more in the next section of the video. In many cases, the act of comparing different normal upgrades against each other is very easy because many of them are strictly better than the others. The decision-making process of which upgrades to choose for your permanent upgrade slots just turns into choose the N most powerful upgrades. The game contains 3 secret Heavenly Upgrades. In order to unlock them, you have to meet a hidden requirement. The game doesn't give you any hints about these requirements or even the fact that these exist at all. The only reason I know of their existence is because I found one of them by accident and that they're mentioned on the wiki. These upgrades are pretty weak. They grant a 1% bonus to each of 3 different aspects of the game. I like that. They constitute a nice little bonus for players who are fortunate enough to encounter them or strategic enough to seek them out. But they are weak enough that they don't punish players who never encounter them. I feel like if Cookie Clicker were a Metroidvania game, these secret upgrades would be nice little collectibles hidden behind obscure secret doors, which don't do anything except look nice in your inventory. I like this. It gives the game a little bit more depth without disrupting the balance. There is a collection of heavenly upgrades that represent boxes of cookies that you might buy at the store. The only thing that these permanent upgrades do is they unlock more flavored cookie normal upgrades you can buy in the course of a run. The flavored cookies are a series of upgrades that grant a small bonus to cookie production and nothing else. One question I had when I first encountered these was, why does the heavenly upgrade unlock new upgrades for a production bonus when it could just provide the equivalent production bonus directly? The answer, I realized, was that at some point in the game, the player has enough passive permanent bonuses that the cost in cookies to buy the normal upgrades becomes irrelevant, so it doesn't actually matter. I've decided that I'm not bothered by this anymore. There are heavenly upgrades which unlock synergy upgrades. Synergy upgrades are normal upgrades that cause 2 building types to boost each other. This is an interesting mechanic, but it serves to highlight just how disconnected the buildings already are from each other. Shouldn't the buildings interact with each other already in the start? Why do I have to make a significant amount of meta progression in order to unlock the ability for buildings to boost each other? To be clear, I don't dislike the synergy upgrades, nor do I dislike the concept of a permanent upgrade whose only function is to unlock a normal upgrade. It's just that the existence of these synergy upgrades highlights the fact that the core mechanics of the game involve 20 building tiers which don't really interact that much with each other, despite all being owned by the same corporation and all serving the same purpose. Some of these heavenly upgrades unlock entire new game mechanics. These mechanics are a bit much in terms of complexity for a player's first run, so it makes sense that they're not available until at least the second run. These are some of the earliest heavenly upgrades available, and they open up entire new systems of the game to play with. I like this concept a lot, and I think they're executed well. I guess I do have a complaint that the seasons mechanic isn't all that interesting. However, if the developer made it too powerful, it would incur balance issues with new pre-ascension players who pick up the game around the time that those in-game seasons would naturally trigger. I think the real problem is just that the core systems of the game aren't super interesting, so adding the season system on top of them doesn't change very much. The Cookie Dragon mechanic, Crumblor the Cookie Dragon, is much more interesting. It allows the player to choose one aura to use. For each building type they've built in this run, they unlock one new aura to select from. Each aura is unique, so there's a little motivation for the player to unlock all the building types because they might be curious about all the different auras they unlock. Additionally, these auras are powerful enough to impact the game's strategies. Some of these auras are even enough to single-handedly enable new strategies on their own. So, what game design lessons can be learned from the successes of the Heavenly Upgrade system? Having separate systems that interact with each other makes them feel like they're part of the same world. Having systems that only interact in one direction makes one system feel like it is superior to another in the sense that it has a power that the other system cannot influence. Not every game needs to use this principle, but when applied properly, it can be a way for the mechanics to evoke a certain feeling or flavor. Hidden collectibles can add a little bit of depth to the game, and any players who find them will feel special. These are metaphorically a cherry on top of an ice cream sundae. They're nice and sweet, but no quantity of them could ever save a failed dessert. Unlocking new mechanics is good. I didn't really get into the reasons why, but there are 2 things I want to briefly mention. Unlocking new game systems gives the player a feeling of progression, and in games that involve a lot of repetition, such as games with reset mechanics, unlocking new mechanics is a great way to make a player's second, third, or fourth run feel fresh. This is especially magnified when the new mechanics in question change the set of strategies that are available to the player. So with how much I liked the heavenly upgrades, why was that system not enough to keep my attention until the end? Why did I stop playing Cookie Clicker if the system was so cool? It comes to the fact that the player can only interact with the heavenly upgrade system once every few hours when the player ascends. The bulk of moment-to-moment gameplay uses other game systems, such as the buildings that I complained about earlier or the normal upgrades. These systems just aren't that much fun for me, so the treat of, hey, I get to look at the heavenly upgrades tree once every while, it wasn't enough to offset that. There is one more game design lesson to be learned from this. If the moment-to-moment gameplay isn't fun, it doesn't matter what else a game has. Normal upgrades and why they're boring. I'm using the term normal upgrades to refer to upgrades that are purchased with cookies, the main currency of the game, during the course of a run. These are reset upon ascension. These are the upgrades that the player is going to interact with for the bulk of their time playing the game. These upgrades have a much larger impact upon the moment-to-moment gameplay than do the heavenly upgrades. To put it bluntly, Cookie Clicker has far too many normal upgrades, and most of them are boring. Many of them, a group called the Flavored Cookies, grant you a small multiplicative bonus to cookie income. There's over 200 of them, with varying unlock conditions, but the vast majority of them are mechanically the same. They give a 2% bonus to cookie production, or maybe it's a 5% bonus, or is it a 4% bonus? This kind of upgrade is extremely impactful in bulk, but individually they're not meaningless, but they're pretty close to meaningless. Earlier I talked about the 20 building types and how, with the exception of 2 of them, they're mechanically identical. Each of these buildings has 15 upgrades which double the production of that one building type. This works out to 300 upgrades that follow the exact same template. The game has approximately 700 upgrades. Between the 200 plus flavored cookies and the 300-ish building tiered upgrades, there's just not much variety among them. By the time a player has reached the mid-game, they've already seen most of the types of upgrades that the game has to offer. In the abstract, the decision-making of which upgrade to purchase with a limited resource supply is an inherently interesting choice to make. Resource allocation is an interesting strategic element in tons of different games that I like. Off the top of my head, there is the early game in Timberborn, where you need to build tons of stuff, but you're bottlenecked by wood harvesting, science production, and your limited population and limited workers. There's Endless Legend, where you can prioritize which technologies to get and which ones to skip, as whether to produce military units or city improvements, time itself being the limited resource to allocate. And there's Kitten's Game, which is, well, the workshop tab is full of upgrades that require the same resources but have vastly different effects. I think the key here that makes these decision-making processes interesting is that the outputs of all these decisions are so different from each other. Part of the strategic depth that these games have is that the player must decide how they value each different outcome, and they must consider the follow-on consequences of their choices. In Timberborn, depending on what the player chooses to build, they might need more workers to operate a new resource production chain, or more power for more buildings, or more flat land to use for construction or farming. In Endless Legend, the different technologies unlock various city improvements, which may be more or less useful depending on which faction you're playing as, which strategic resources your empire has available, and which resources your empire needs more of. In Kitten's Game, the different upgrades range from being particularly helpful to nearly useless, depending on which resources you're bottlenecked on and what your playstyle is. I want to more carefully compare Cookie Clicker to Antimatter Dimensions. I'll try not to spoil anything past the early to mid-game, but I recommend this game if you want to completely avoid spoilers. Skip ahead to the timestamp that's displayed on screen right now. Or preferably visit https://ivark.github.io/antimatterdimensions and play the game for yourself. Of all of the non-cookie related games that I'll mention in this video, I believe Antimatter Dimensions is the most similar to Cookie Clicker. Both of these games are focused on a singular resource at the core of all others. In Antimatter Dimensions, every upgrade in the entire game boils down to produce more antimatter in some way or other. However, these upgrades accomplish this through different means. The gameplay loop is all about the player leveraging their understanding of the game mechanics to carefully strategize which upgrades they'll pick. Even though the game has plenty of upgrades, they feel meaningfully distinct from each other. For example, there's one upgrade that gives you a direct multiplier to all antimatter dimensions that grows over time. There's this other upgrade that increases the by 10 multiplier. There's a third upgrade that doesn't even mention antimatter, it just says all galaxies are twice as strong. These upgrades feel interesting because they approach the goal of producing more antimatter from different directions. Each one of them feels meaningful in its own way. Also, as the player progresses further through antimatter dimensions, they'll unlock new upgrades and new ways for those upgrades to affect their antimatter income. For a new player experiencing for the first time, there is a sense of wonder whenever I unlocked something new. Take, for example, the Infinity Challenges. These are a set of more difficult runs that grant, as a reward, production bonuses, but each of them improve a different aspect of the game. Here, given that the first 3 Infinity Challenges provide a multiplier to infinity dimensions, improve the formula of dimensional sacrifice, and provide a multiplier to antimatter dimensions, can you predict what the rewards from Infinity Challenges 4 through 6 are? I'll leave this as an exercise to the viewer. Did you get all of them correct? Did you get any of them correct? When I played the game for the first time, it was exciting whenever I unlocked a new feature because I had no idea what to expect it would do. In contrast, after I'd played Cookie Clicker for just a short period of time, I already knew what to expect from the vast majority of upgrades in the game. These examples demonstrate that my tastes in game design much prefer quality over quantity. Even just the small slice of anti-matter mentions that I mentioned in this video has maybe 24 upgrades at most, but those 20-some upgrades contain more variety than hundreds of upgrades in Cookie Clicker. I would rather play a game with 10 interesting upgrades than a game with 2 interesting upgrades and 100 boring ones. Recently, I finished my playthrough of Antimatter Dimensions, and I started up a new one because I liked it that much. Back to Cookie Clicker. The upgrades that you encounter in the early game are much the same as the upgrades you get to see in the late game. Actually, the late game upgrades are even less varied, because all of the one-time upgrades, such as a few that are related to golden cookies, or the research upgrades that trigger the Grand Apocalypse, those are available in the early game. So by the time you reach the late game, the upgrades panel contains exclusively upgrades that are the same as ones you've seen 100 times before. Even as the numbers get bigger, I don't feel like I'm making meaningful progress, and I get bored with the decisions that the game offers to me. It feels like I'm repeating everything I've already seen, all for what reward? You could say that it's to get heavenly chips and prestige levels to make me more powerful in future runs. Sounds nice, but then what? I'm not going to find any more interesting gameplay, it's just more of the same. Prestige mechanics in games are most meaningful when they are a tool for the player to work towards something interesting, but that requires that the core systems of the game be very interesting. In Antimatter Dimensions, whenever you reach a major milestone, the game gives you one more goal that's just a little farther out, but also the game gives you new systems to play with. Antimatter Dimensions also has an interesting solution to the problem of gameplay feeling repetitive. At many points throughout the game, an entire system of the game becomes obsolete. When this happens, the game gives you automation tools to automatically optimize that system of the game, so that the player can keep their mental focus on the few systems of the game that cannot be automated, which demand strategic planning and thought. So, what game design lessons can we learn from this? The more of a player's time is spent interacting with a system, the more crucial it is for that system to be fun at its core to interact with. When too many upgrades, or even too many game pieces are too similar to each other, they lose their individuality and their meaning. When a game has fewer upgrades, or really any game piece, but they are very different from each other, they become more important. This is especially true in strategy games or in any situation when decisions have consequences that may give the player new challenges to solve in the future. Higher layers of a game strategy, such as prestige mechanics, will stop producing compelling gameplay when their substrate, that is the lower layer moment-to-moment gameplay, stops being compelling. One approach to address repetitive gameplay is to give the player automation tools to take that part of the gameplay away. I hypothesize that this only works if there are other non-repetitive things for the player to focus on. Minigames, extra tacked-on bits. For those of you not familiar with the concept, a minigame is a short game often contained within another video game. A minigame contains different gameplay elements and is often smaller or more simplistic than the game in which it is contained. In Cookie Clicker, some of the building types have associated minigames. These minigames are fine, I guess, but they feel disconnected from the rest of the game in the sense that there is little to no correlation between progression through the main game and progression through the minigames. The Pantheon is the one that I enjoy most out of all the minigames within Cookie Clicker. Earlier, I complained that the normal upgrades were boring because they had almost no variety. The Pantheon, in contrast, has a wonderful spread of variety. It is an excellent example of many mechanically different effects condensed into a single place. The Pantheon has one-way interactions with most other systems in the game. Notably, there's no mechanical link between Pantheons and temples specifically, which is weird because it would make a lot of flavorful sense. The Pantheon also does not interact with any of the other minigames. This lack of interaction causes it and the other minigames to feel, at least in my opinion, strangely disconnected from the core gameplay of Cookie Clicker. The stock market is the minigame associated with banks. As far as minigames go, it is mechanically connected with each other building in the game, in the sense that the amount and level of those buildings affects a few of the internal numbers in the stock market. This only goes one way, however. Progressing far in the stock market won't mechanically affect any other buildings. The stock market introduces a new currency that's only used within that one minigame, and that generates a feeling of disconnect. This currency can be exchanged for cookies, but the exchange rate scales with your cookie production, such that progressing through the main game doesn't help you get more of this currency. It doesn't affect progression in the stock market. You know, personally, I'm not super interested in stock market minigames, so I'm just going to ignore the stock market. The Grimoire is the minigame that is associated with Wizard Towers. It has a resource called Magic that is used to cast magical spells. In theory, the Grimoire is interesting because each different magic spell interacts with a different system of the game. However, in practice, the Grimoire is quite unbalanced. One of the spells in it is so strong that all the others are useless by comparison. At least it feels that way to me. More advanced players might disagree. I'm not sure. However, if the Grimoire were balanced, it wouldn't be that bad, because it interacts with most systems of the main game, although it doesn't interact with the other minigames in the slightest. The Garden is the minigame that is associated with farms. First of all, the flavor doesn't make sense to me. You're telling me that over here, I have hundreds of industrial-scale cookie farms, and over here there's a little tiny plot of earth in my backyard, and somehow it's relevant in comparison? Flavor aside, this video is about game mechanics after all. One of the biggest strengths of the Garden is that its design encourages experimentation. In the Garden minigame, there are various types of seeds to grow different plants. Each plant has a unique effect, and they provide small bonuses to different systems of the main game. Planting different species close to each other has a chance to breed new mutated plants. Through this method, the player can gradually unlock more types of plants to use. The game does not give any hints as to which combinations of plants will yield new species. It is entirely up to the player to figure this out. There are very few outside systems that have an effect on the Garden, but one thing that I think is nice touch is that the Garden cares about farms. Depending on the number of farms built in this run, the player will unlock different types of soil to use in the Garden. Depending on how many permanent levels the player has gained with Sugar Lumps, the available planting area will increase, allowing the player to have more plants in the Garden at once. I think the biggest reason that the different minigames feel disconnected from the main game is that none of them interact with each other, which makes none of them feel like they're part of the main game. Sure, one can use the Grimoire to summon a few extra golden cookies while they have some garden plants that make those golden cookies ever so slightly more potent. But there are no systems in any of the minigames that interact with the systems directly of any other minigame. As a result, it makes Cookie Clicker feel less like a single cohesive game and more like a collection of various cookie-themed vignettes. What game design lessons can we learn from these minigames? When a single game system has limited ways of interacting with anything else, it can feel as though it doesn't belong as part of the same game. Personally, me, interesting design choices, I don't like stock market minigames. Now that I think about it, this explains the current state of my investment portfolio. When a single game piece is much more powerful than others, it can lead to the creation of a dominant strategy. I don't want to claim that having a dominant strategy is always a bad thing, but in many cases it is a symptom of flawed design. When a game has too many systems that don't interact much with each other, the game overall will feel less cohesive and more just like it's a container for those systems. Conclusion: a summary of game design lessons learned. I wouldn't call Cookie Clicker a bad game. If you enjoy the game, that's fine, I guess. I just have found out, through my own experience, that every single time I play Cookie Clicker, I think about how much I'd rather be playing other games instead. The game feels like it's just too mechanically shallow for my tastes. But I'm not here just to complain about a game I stopped playing, I want to learn from this experience. So, to review, here's a list of game design lessons that I learned in this analysis. I've noticed that I personally am willing to tolerate having a few shallow systems in a game if the other systems in the game contain sufficient depth to offset that. Where possible, game mechanics should resonate strongly with flavor. Where possible, game mechanics should resonate strongly with the narrative that the game intends to tell, and the interactions between the game mechanics and the player will tell a narrative, whether or not that was the designer's intention. Having separate systems that interact with each other makes them feel like they're part of the same world. Having systems that only interact in one direction makes one system feel like it is superior to another in the sense that it has a power that the other system cannot influence. When applied properly, it can be a way for the mechanics to evoke a certain feeling or flavor. Hidden collectibles can add a little bit of depth to the game, and any players who find them will feel special. Unlocking new mechanics is good. If the moment-to-moment gameplay isn't fun, it doesn't matter what else a game has. The more of a player's time is spent interacting with a system, the more crucial it is for that system to be fun at its core to interact with. When too many upgrades, or even too many game pieces are too similar to each other, they lose their individuality and their meaning. When a game has fewer upgrades, or really any game piece, but they are very different from each other, they become more important. Higher layers of a game strategy, such as prestige mechanics, will stop producing compelling gameplay when their substrate, that is the lower layer moment-to-moment gameplay, stops being compelling. One approach to address repetitive gameplay is to give the player automation tools to take that part of the gameplay away. When a single game system has limited ways of interacting with anything else, it can feel as though it doesn't belong as part of the same game. When a single game piece is much more powerful than others, it can lead to the creation of a dominant strategy. I don't want to claim that having a dominant strategy is always a bad thing, but in many cases it is a symptom of flawed design. When a game has too many systems that don't interact much with each other, the game overall will feel less cohesive and more just like it's a container for those systems. Credits. First off, let's give a shout out to Orteal, the guy who created Cookie Clicker. I don't really like Cookie Clicker that much, but it's very obvious to me that Orteal put a lot of time and a lot of effort into making the game and to polishing it, and that shows. The game is well polished, it's well built, and I don't think it's fun. That's why I play other games instead. I also want to note Cookie Clicker's impact on popularizing the genre of incremental games. Despite my dislike for this game in particular, I cannot begrudge its influence. Orteal has also made some really cool non-cookie related stuff. If you have some time, check out Nested. I wouldn't call Nested a game, but it's really cool. I don't know, I just like the vibes. It's cool. While we're at it, I want to give thanks to my therapist. Therapy has been super huge in improving my mental health, and my mental health has been important when I was working on this video. My therapist made my life better, so thank you, therapist. On a related note, I want to give thanks to God. It's because of God that I was able to find a good therapist when I most needed it. I also want to give gratitude to the folks who made the Cookie Clicker wiki and the subreddit, because I scraped those sites for information. That was pretty helpful. I want to say thank you to the folks who wrote that one Wikipedia article that I quoted earlier. And I want to thank Merriam and Webster because I really like their dictionary. I used a bunch of music assets and images. I'm not going to list them all verbally, but here's a list on screen. Also, there was a bunch of stock assets that came with my video editing software that were pretty nice to have, so thanks for including them in the software. Additionally, mega thanks to my friend Story for teaching me how to use OBS. This is a bit unrelated, but while I was collecting information for this video, I found out that there are some other talented people on YouTube that made videos specifically about universal paperclips. Now, I know that universal paperclips has nothing to do with cookies, and that paperclips don't taste good, but I want to give shoutouts and share some links to these videos because they're pretty good. Bob the Guy made a video explaining why he likes universal paperclips so much. You should play universal paperclips and then watch his video. Jacob Geller made a video explaining why universal paperclips made him feel claustrophobic. You should play universal paperclips, then watch his video. There's also Antimatter Dimensions. I recently finished playing that game, so it's fresh on my mind, but I had a lot of fun with it. If you clicked on a video about Cookie Clicker, then chances are you're interested in the genre of incremental games. Maybe you might enjoy Antimatter Dimensions. I also want to specifically thank my friend from church for recommending it to me. It's because of you that, I don't know, I had a lot of fun collecting antimatter. Okay, goodbye.